On a surface level, Mini Motorways is a fun game about getting these happy little cars to an angry little destination as fast as possible. It's the reason why we do this. And not this. It's the reason why we don't do this, and instead use these. At its core, this game is an exercise in optimization, and more specifically an exercise in what I like to call the minimum optimization for a viable expressway, or MOVE for short. Essentially, if you can't move it, you lose it. You have to create a traffic network that at least meets the current MOVE criteria, and this is a criteria that grows as the game continues. Now retro, you'll say. That's all fine and dandy, and wow, you made a cute acronym that makes you sound more like a government agency looking to improve their image than a YouTuber, but why does this matter to me? Well, simply put, understanding the strategy can only be done intuitively up until a certain point. For example, you know that this is better than this. But how much better? And for how long will it meet the MOVE criteria as the game progresses? Well, that's where the math begins. And honestly, the more I sat and thought about the math, I realized that there was so much more to learn and understand. And how could you ever understand all of it? You'd have to consider the speed of the car along a sloped axis, diagonal versus straight roads, min-maxed house layouts and traffic patterns, and when do I have to calculate the tangent of the motorway arc? What about traffic snakes and car accidents, the optimal setup for a level 1 structure versus a level 2 structure? No. Stop. I refuse to do math for a game. End of story. Find a different content creator. I won't do it. Okay, I did the math. I was curious. Sue me. But there's a lot of it. And to really understand MOVE in its entirety, it's going to take more than one video. Today though, let's just focus on one question. How many cars will each destination ask for? So, this was the most painstaking part of the process, because it's the sliding scale of difficulty, and it changes as the game progresses. When I built my models, I decided not to think about it as a continuous data set, so I've split it into weekly trip bins, and yes, that does mean I had to count every pip. Every single one. For an entire game. Twice, just to make sure. That's right everyone, I put in 10 hours of work for a 3-minute video on the basis that there's probably an underlying system. So if you're not jamming those like and subscribe buttons yet, you better by the end of this video just for the work I put in, let alone the video itself. Also, I ran a poll a couple weeks ago, and 75% of my audience thought I'd hit 1 million views before 10k subs. So please hit the subscribe button so that the underdogs can win for once, okay? Anyways, thanks, and back to the math. Here's the trip speeds per week. Now, I'd like to note that these are the total number of pips for the entire week, and not per structure. Feel free to pause the video if you really want to look at the numbers, but I've also got graphs, which paint a much better picture of the data. Here's total trips per week, which then generated the average trips per destination, and then there's the number of trips that have yet to be completed per week. Take note that there seems to be a bit of a topping pattern happening here, near the end. That's important for later. Now, remember that the maximum number of pips on a level 1 structure is 10, and 16 on a level 2 structure, and that's only achievable if every pip slot is full. But why is this important? As long as you have enough cars going to it, then there shouldn't be an issue, right? Well, that's going a little outside the scope of this video, because we'd have to start talking about things like car flow rates in relation to the pip growth speeds to really answer that topic, but for now let me answer it with a slightly different statistic and a very quick footnote. If you're able to handle the trips generated at a destination and it never caps out, and I mean never, theoretically a pattern will emerge across structures of the same color. This clip is taken from my 10k LA challenge run. Look at the yellow structures in this clip. This clip was taken from week 5 of the game. You can see that the destinations alternate the pips that they produce, and at nearly exact, if not exact, intervals. First this one, then this one, then over there, and here. It's so consistent that the number of trips for a level 1 structure across an entire week will be identical to all other level 1 structures of that color for that week, and the level 2 structure rates are almost exactly double the level 1 structures. Now remember, this is the behavior if your structures are below their maximum 100% of the time. But what happens when a structure is full? What I've found through my testing is that the pips that would typically go to a full structure are likely being put onto another structure of the same color instead, increasing their relative pips per week, and thereby straining your other structures to breaking points. This is probably why, looking back at all my failed runs, it's the level 1 structure that seems to break under the pressure of late game the most, because their tolerance for hidden pip rates is much less than their larger level 2 counterparts. Now, I will note that I can't be certain if the passing of trips is just within the color group or across all colors. That is a question with no publicly available answer because of the complexity of the entire system. But for simplicity's sake, I'll assume that it's a within color movement. Now, that's a lot of talk and not a lot of proof. So let's look at only the green structures in this clip, this time in week 26 of the game, when full trips on a structure is normal. For the sake of time, I'll talk over the footage so that you can see it happening in real time. We choose green because it's the least difficult to count, and the game was pretty favorable with the spawn locations, so it can be assumed that it is at least keeping up with demand to some degree. However, there are many times when trips will flood in and reach the maximum number for the structure. That is 10 for an angry level 1 structure and 16 for the angry level 2s. But it's managed, and that's the key part. If we assume that the pip sharing hypothesis is true, we should see wildly different total trip numbers for each structure at the end of the week, but a total that is reasonably close to our expected trips per building level for the week, multiplied by 4 because we have 2 level 1 structures and 1 level 2 structure. Now, it's tough to keep track of it all, but I manually counted each of the structures one at a time and got the following scores. Bottom left, 45, middle, 55, and top, 62. Now, this is interesting because you would assume that the level 2 structure would follow the trend that we saw before and generate twice as many pips, but that's not the case. Instead, it only has 7 more pips than the middle structure and a little less than 20 more than the bottom left one. But in total, the data still fits our expected trips per building level model, which states that the number of expected trips is equal to 4 times 1.4935 times 26 weeks plus 9.2863, which is approximately equal to 156. Only 6 off of my manual count of 162. Given that I'm human, and probably miscounted some, it is extremely likely that our shared trip hypothesis is true, and that the buildings were sharing pips once their caps were reached, which is an interesting note to make from a strategic point of view. It implies that the game doesn't care that one structure is at maximum, it just finds a spot for each pip in that color group. So a structure that is full but under control, or even just close to full but under control, can have detrimental effects on structures that it isn't even connected to. Crazy, right? So how does all this math help us? There's 2 takeaways. First, our model for the minimum optimization for a viable expressway is potentially valid, and we can use that to inform our future decisions and future statistics. Second, it means we need to consider much more complicated things if we really want to optimize in this game, since underneath the surface of the game is a much more interconnected world than we first thought. But this is more than enough for now. Next time we'll dive into another part of this puzzle and discuss the other major component of this game: cars and roads. Only then can we really move on to more complicated metrics like flow rates, recommended vehicles per second, distance calculations, and so much more. And as always, if you enjoyed this analysis and want to be notified of the next video when it comes out, hit the like and subscribe button so YouTube knows that you enjoyed the content and want to see more. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.